we need to talk about a name that I think everybody knows, but almost nobody actually understands.
Oh, for sure.
I mean, you hear Noam Chomsky,
Mm.
and you probably think of the political activist, right? The guy
Yeah.
criticizing foreign policy, the dissenter.
That's the public figure, yeah.
But if you rewind the clock, say to the mid-20th century, before all of that, this is the guy who fundamentally rewired, and I mean completely dismantled and rebuilt how we even defined language.
It really is impossible to overstate the shift. To get how radical he was, you have to look at what linguistics was before him.
Right.
In the early 50s, linguistics was basically a classification task. It was like botany. You go out, collect your specimens, sounds, words, whatever, and you just organize them into lists.
And Chomsky looked at that and said, what?
He said, no. Language isn't a list of things you say. It's a machine in your mind that generates what you say.
The contrast is pretty stark.
Yes.
I was looking at a standard textbook from that era in 1955 by Henry A. Gleason.
Yeah.
And the way it talks about syntax, honestly, it felt like a total afterthought.
It was an afterthought. In that book, An Introduction to Descriptive Linguistics, syntax is just one thin chapter. It's squeezed between 5 chapters on morphology, word formation, and another on inflection.
Just a tiny slice of the pie.
A tiny slice. Gleason's definition was basically just principles of arrangement. The whole idea was, if you can describe the linear order of words, you're done. Your job is finished.
So, okay, the before picture is linguistics as segmenting sounds and making lists. And Chomsky comes along. But the thing that gets me is that this whole revolution, it didn't start with some big declaration. It started with what he called a private hobby.
That's exactly right. It goes back to his undergraduate thesis at the University of Pennsylvania around 1949. He was working under Zelig Harris, who was a giant in structural linguistics.
And Harris's method was very strict, right? Very bottom up.
Extremely. You start with the smallest sounds, the phonemes, you build those into morphemes, then into words. It was all about this methodical segmentation of data you collected.
And Chomsky tried to apply this to modern Hebrew.
He did. He picked Hebrew because he knew it so well. But he found the structuralist method, well, to use his own words, it was dull and unsatisfying.
It's felt like data processing.
Exactly. It didn't explain anything, it just cataloged it. So he abandoned the bottom-up approach and tried something that felt more intuitive. He went top-down. He started trying to write a system of recursive rules that could generate the sentences from scratch.
It's funny, though, looking at his notes from back then, he didn't even think this was, real science.
Not all.
He called it a hobby that real linguists would laugh at because it didn't start with phonetics.
And yet, that hobby becomes the foundation for syntactic structures in 1957. And that is the turning point. That's where we get this whole new definition of syntax.
So it's not just the arrangement of words anymore.
No, now it's the principles and processes by which sentences are constructed. He's shifting the entire focus from the language, the static collection of stuff, to the grammar, the dynamic device in your head that's producing it.
Okay, so let's get into the mechanics of this device, because this is where we move from lists to these phrase structure rules. We've all seen these, right? The tree diagrams.
The tree diagrams, yeah.
Sentence goes to NP plus VP.
Exactly. It's a rewrite rule. You start with a symbol for a sentence, and the rule just tells you to rewrite it as a noun phrase plus a verb phrase. And then you have other rules to rewrite the verb phrase and so on until you get to the actual words.
And that creates the phrase marker, that tree structure.
Yes, and it shows that a sentence isn't just a string of beads in a line. It has a hierarchical geometry.
Right, but simple phrase structure rules weren't enough, were they?
Yeah.
I mean, they could generate sentences, sure, but they were awful at showing how different sentences are related to each other.
This is the next crucial piece of the puzzle. You're right. Phrase structure rules are great for a basic skeleton, but they can't easily explain the relationship between, say, an active sentence and a passive one.
To a structuralist, they're just two totally different patterns.
Totally different. The man takes the book, and this book is taken by the man. Two separate lists. But Chomsky argued they come from the same underlying place.
And this is where we get the hidden machinery, the transformations. So you'd have a passive transformation rule that just moves stuff around.
It's surprisingly mechanical. The rule takes the noun phrase, the book, and moves it to the front. It takes the man, moves it to the end, and then it inserts specific machinery. The be verb, the N ending for the participle, and the word by.
But the part that really stands out to me here is how he dealt with time, with tense. In that 1957 system, he introduced this idea of O.
As in AUX, short for auxiliary. This was a massive insight. In that early system, Chomsky separated the concept of tense past, present, from the actual verb itself.
So in the math of your mind, past tense is just this free-floating operator.
Exactly. It sits in the O node, totally separate from the word take.
So tense isn't glued to the verb at first. It's just floating nearby.
Precisely. In the underlying structure, you have the abstract concept of past tense sitting next to take. Then a transformation rule, he called it a hopping rule, hops the tense onto the verb, and that's how you get took.
Wow.
And this distinction between the underlying form and the phonetic form, that was revolutionary. It meant what we say is just the surface. The real logic is happening deep underneath.
That abstraction makes the system incredibly predictive. You can generate active, passive, negative questions, all from the same core structure, just by applying different transformation rules.
It's like having a master key. Instead of needing 4 different keys for 4 different doors, you have one key mechanism that just transforms to fit whichever lock you need.
And this shift from describing lists to trying to understand the internal machine, that leads us right into the 1960s and the cognitive revolution. Because if language is a generative device, the next big question is, where does it live?
And the answer isn't in a library. It's in the head. This is the big shift from what he called E-language to I-language.
E-language being?
External. Right. Externalized language. That's the set of all the sentences people actually say. It's what the structuralists were studying. Chomsky shifts the focus to I-language, internalized language, the mental state of the speaker.
And once you start thinking of language as a mental organ, you hit a huge logical problem.
Massive one.
The logical problem of language acquisition. This is the part that just makes you look at toddlers completely differently.
Right.
You realize they're doing something that should be mathematically impossible if they were just learning by imitation.
It's the poverty of the stimulus argument. Basically, children know things about language that they were never taught. And crucially, things they have never, ever heard. They know which sentences are deviant or just plain bad, even if they've never encountered them.
There's a famous example of this, right? A sentence that sounds awful, but it's really hard to explain why if you're just going by feel. The sentence is, "Whom did your interest in seem to me rather strange."
It just sounds terrible, doesn't it?
It's so clunky. But compare it to something like, "Who did you lose interest in?" That sounds perfectly fine.
Perfectly fine. We end sentences with prepositions all the time. So why is that first one so ungrammatical?
Yeah, why? Is it just that whom sounds old-fashioned? Is the sentence just too long?
It's not length, and it's not the word whom, it's geometry. Think of the phrase, your interest in whom, as a locked box. In grammar, the subject of a sentence, in this case, your interest in whom, is like a secure container. We call it an island.
Okay, so the subject is an island.
Right. And there is a strict, unbreakable rule in your brain. You cannot reach inside a subject island, grab a word like whom, and drag it all the way to the front of the sentence.
The grammar police stop you.
The grammar police universal grammar blocks that move every time, so the child just knows instinctively you can't steal words out of that locked box.
But nobody ever sat them down and said, "Listen, Timmy, you cannot extract a we phrase from a complex subject-noun phrase."
Never. Which implies
The rule has to be built in.
it has to be. And that is universal grammar, or UG. This is where Chomsky directly challenged the behaviorists, people like B.F. Skinner, who thought language was just habit and conditioning. Chomsky said, no, it's a biological trait. It's a mental organ.
And this gets us to that famous switchboard metaphor, principles and parameters.
Yes. The idea is that universal grammar provides the principles. That's the basic wiring of the switchboard that all humans share. Then you have parameters. Those are the switches.
So a child is born with the switchboard already installed.
Exactly. If they grow up in Tokyo, their experience flips the switches to the Japanese settings. If they grow up in London, they flip them to English.
So a parameter might be something like, English says you must have a subject, but Spanish says, you can drop the subject if you want. That's just one switch.
That's just one parameter setting. It's a beautiful way to explain how you can have one universal human brain, but so many different languages. They're just variations on the same biological theme.
Okay, so we've gone from language as a list to language as a complex mental machine. But, and this is where the story gets a little messy, right? By the 1980s, this switchboard was getting enormous.
It really was. You had principles, parameters, you had rules for case, rules for government, binding theory. The whole system was becoming incredibly heavy. Linguists just kept finding more and more little switches to explain every quirk of every language.
So usually in science, things just get more complicated. You find a new particle, you add it to the model. But in the 1990s, Chomsky looks at this huge, bloated system he created and says, what? This can't be right.
Pretty much. He says, wait a minute, nature isn't usually this messy. And he takes this hard left turn. He starts what's called the minimalist program. And he asks, what if we delete almost everything? What if the system isn't complex? What if it's actually perfect?
That seems like a massive gamble to just throw out the specific rules that made him famous in the first place.
A huge gamble. He stripped the entire system down to one single core operation, merge.
Merge. It sounds so simple. You just take two things and put them together. But why is that such a big deal?
Because this might be the big bang of human cognition. Chomsky argues that at some point, a slight rewiring happened in the human brain that gave us this one capacity, the ability to take two concepts, say the and book, and combine them
You need the book.
into the book, and then, and this is the crucial part, to treat that new unit, the book, as a single object that you can then combine with something else.
That's recursion.
That is recursion. You take the book and merge it with is read. Then you take the book is read and merge it with I think that. You can build infinite complexity from finite parts. That merge operation is probably the wedge that separates human minds from all other animals.
So hold on. If we only have merge, what happened to all that movement? You know, moving the noun phrase to the front to make a passive sentence.
That's just merge again. He calls it internal merge. If you have a structure like saw the man and you want to move the man, you don't actually move it, you copy it. You take the man and you merge a copy of it at the beginning of the structure.
So movement is really just copy and paste.
Basically. And this leads to what's called the copy theory. When we say a sentence like, the man seems to have taken the books, your brain actually sees the phrase the man in two different places.
Okay.
It sees it at the front, where we say it out loud, but it also sees a silent copy down by the verb taken, which is where it gets its meaning, as the one doing the taken.
And our brain just deletes the sound of that second one so we don't say it.
Exactly. The system is efficient. It deletes the copy at the phonetic form interface so we don't stutter, but it keeps the copy at the logical form interface so we understand who did what to whom.
This sounds like it ties into that concept of economy. The idea that the whole system is kind of lazy, but in a good way. The last resort principle.
This is absolutely key to the minimalist program. The idea is that the computational system only does something if it has to. For example, why do we even move words? Well, the theory says we move them to satisfy some requirement, like checking a case feature, making sure a noun is properly tagged as a subject or an object. If the system doesn't need to move it, it won't.
So if I try to say something like, it was reported the man to have taken the books, that just sounds wrong.
It is wrong because the man is stuck in a position where its case feature can't be checked. So as a last resort, the system has to move it to the front to create. The man was reported to have taken the books. Now it's grammatically safe. The movement wasn't a choice. It was a rescue operation.
This all leads to the grandest claim of all, the strong minimalist thesis. This isn't just about language being functional anymore. Chomsky is suggesting language might be an optimal solution.
It is an incredibly bold hypothesis. The idea is we have two interfaces to satisfy. We have sound, the sensorimotor system, our mouths and ears, and we have meaning, the conceptual intentional system, our thoughts. Chomsky's thesis is that the language faculty connects these two systems in the most efficient way that is theoretically possible.
So it connects sound and meaning with zero waste.
Zero waste. No superfluous symbols, no unnecessary steps. If this thesis is right, it means the internal machine of language isn't some messy, cobbled-together evolutionary accident. It's a perfect biological computation.
But that brings up this idea of the third factor. You have factor 1, genetics, UG. Factor 2, experience, what you hear. What on earth is factor 3?
And this is where it gets really profound. Factor 3 refers to principles of efficient computation that aren't specific to language at all. They might just be laws of nature.
Laws of nature. You mean like...
Laws. Exactly. Think of a honeycomb. Why do bees build hexagons? It's not because they have a gene for hexagons. It's because physics dictates that a hexagon is the most efficient possible shape to pack together. It uses the least amount of wax to store the most honey. It's a solution imposed by nature.
So Chomsky is saying our sentences are hexagons.
In a way, yes. He's suggesting that the very structure of our grammar, the way merge works, the way we build these trees, might just be determined by universal laws of physics and efficient computation. We speak the way we do because it's the mathematically optimal way to link sound and meaning.
That is a heavy thought.
Yeah.
It implies language isn't just a human invention or even just a biological mutation. It might be physical law made manifest in our minds.
And it completely changes how you look at the so-called messiness of language. You know, we think language is clumsy, we misunderstand each other, we stumble over our words, we say, and, but Chomsky's insight suggests that the internal machine, the syntax, the I language, is flawless.
So all the confusion and ambiguity, those aren't bugs in the code.
No. They're limitations of the printer. Our mouths, our memory, our ears, those are the bottlenecks. But the blueprint, the code running in your head, it's pristine.
Well, that is a provocative thought to leave you on. The next time you stumble over a sentence, just remember, your internal machine is building perfect trees. It's just the interface that's having a bad day. Thanks for this deep dive into the mind of Noam Chomsky.
It's been a real pleasure.
We'll see you on the next one.